preliminary site reuse initiative. I received an email from Bill Wheaton, and he was interested in discussing the as-of-right versus special permitting for this site. And also, board members have received a memorandum from me dated February 23rd, 2023, in which I reviewed various provisions of our zoning bylaw that may certainly be pertinent to any draft overlay district for this site. And those bylaw provisions include section 10.6 and several others. So particularly those relating to site plan review and special permitting. So, Bill, I will ask you how you would like to proceed with your concerns about those two provisions for reviewing new construction as well as
Recording in progress.
alterations to existing structures.
My suggestion was that the only as-right development that can occur on the Hill be what already exists. That is to say, there's footprints for multifamily on the lower and middle, and for a range of educational buildings at the top, and that our as-of-right development build-out would mimic what was there. In other words, they could either use what is there, or they could replace what is there, and any net additions to the commercial space at the top of the hill or to the further apartment development in the middle of the lower part of the hill, that would all come under site plan review. I'm sorry, that would all be special permit. So we could also, in line with what Emil and Jonathan have put together, we could have guidelines for that site plan review, limits, say we...
Permit, or...
I'm sorry, special permit, we could have sort of limits and guidelines for that. But I guess I would not want to give by right anything more than what is already there.
Well, did you have an opportunity to review the memorandum that I prepared?
No, I did not. Actually, I'm not sure, like,
So why is that relevant?
The memorandum that I did?
Yeah.
Because site plan review applies as it stands now to all new construction unless specific exceptions apply. So I was struck by Attorney Walter's statement that he wanted all as-of-right development, almost for any development on the site, and that there would be site plan review only in very limited circumstances. But any other taxpayer in Hamilton, if they wanted to build a new house or a commercial building, would have to go through site plan review. The provisions for site plan review that are set forth in...
No, you don't need to go into that detail. I understand that.
So what would be happening here is that the seminary would be getting a benefit of no site plan review that no other
Well, I think...
resident or developer in Hamilton...
Marnie asked how...
Can I finish up my question,
Okay.
Phil?
Sure.
So I just didn't catch the first part. You just said Merwin was making this statement from
Yeah.
Gordon Theological. Yeah, well, he clearly didn't understand what by right and site plan review are. So, and he kept interchanging these things. So site plan review goes with by right.
Right, that was
So-
my point.
Right. So you didn't need to do all of that, but thank you for doing it. So...
I thought it would be helpful
No,
for
right.
Mr. Walters, if no one else.
No. I get it. So, right, and Jonathan Whitten explained that in his last last discussion, we talked about that because I asked the clarification question, and he clarified that and said, with by right, you have site plan review, you can condition it, but you can't condition it to make it uneconomic for the applicant to develop. So that's fine. The discussion we had last time, and we seemed to come to the agreement that certainly the existing housing in the lower campus would be by right, because it's there. I think what you're saying, Bill, makes sense as well. For those buildings that are there, they would be by right as well. So,
Would you be in favor of any adaptive reuse, coming under site plan review?
well, and we're getting into the fine points.
Okay.
Yes, for example, and Dave Gamble was explaining, and I think Emil actually, or Jonathan did as well in a prior drawing, is showing Kerr Building, I think it is, with some additions to fill in the gap between the two wings, that could be parking or some further development. I think that could be by right as well, if it, doesn't exceed some percentage of the building, or it could be a very easy special permit. Something like that, so that you're basically keeping the same footprint, you're modifying it, but you're not making a substantial change to it, in that it's, you're trying to do adaptive reuse of the building to make it economically viable and usable by somebody who wants to maintain that building. But my question is, and John Whitten had suggested this, and I want the board to sort of talk about it, is before going into the details about the actual zoning, is what is it that we want to protect, and begin that process, so we understand what it is that we are keeping and excluding from development. And then looking at the site and saying, okay, given the parcels, sections left, what do you want to do on those sites? Either by right or by special permit. So I'm wondering, and unfortunately John Whitten isn't here, but that's what I thought his charge was to us the last time, was give him what it is that you want to protect and retain on the site. That leaves you the parcels to determine what you want to do with it.
I would agree with that as the next step and next priorities, and I would love to see the board talk about that tonight.
Yeah, that's what I
Right,
think that.
and I actually think there's quite a bit of consensus that the actual reuse of existing structures there
Oh, yeah, I
be
think,
as of right, subject, of course, to
Yeah.
Section 10.6. So I'm not seeing that as a problem.
and I'm just saying, pardon the expression, cart before the horse. Before we get into that level of detail, we ought to know what it is we're going to protect. And then we can decide, okay, within those zones, and I think you're right, everybody pretty much agrees that certainly the existing 209 units of housing should be by right, because it's already there. So subject to site plan review with conditions.
Well, I wouldn't be quite so, remember, they're there as dormitories.
Yeah.
And
they're not
and
gonna remain
what
as
they want to,
dormitories.
I know, they're there physically, but in fact, dormitories are not the same thing as apartments. They have different fiscal impacts, they have different valuations, they're different, so they're not allowed to convert them without either a zoning bylaw change or a variance or some, it has to be a variance or a bylaw change. So we're giving them
That's what we're talking
those
about.
changes.
Right, that's
Right.
what we're doing.
By right, that's right.
Yeah, agreed. So,
But I think anything they add to the site runs the risk of having three impacts that the town as a whole and the board should be very concerned about. One is open space. Two is any kind of impact on light and on traffic. and on the abutters. And I
Well,
think,
Yeah, I agree with you, Bill, and I
Okay.
think that's why delineating the landscaping barriers, the zones you're going to protect, will help us capture what we want to protect on the site, and then then we can say, okay, within those sections that we have determined are most amenable to development, how do we want to control that development?
special permit.
So I'd like to pursue the first one first, because that will then lead to the second one naturally.
So what Rick, I think, is getting at is that on January 10th, we identified our preferences to how certain features of this site should be protected, as well as certain buildings. And so maybe what we want to do is to reiterate that and see if we can't reach a consensus that that is how we envision a good starting point for any development on this site. So I would welcome other board members to identify those particular sites, and maybe the map that Emil prepared could help us if we looked at that.
Well, the first map I'd like to show, I guess, actually is the one that was developed on the visioning workshop.
Are you going to share your screen, Emil?
Yeah, I'd like to share the screen.
So, Pat, can you play?
And that's our visioning workshop on January 10th, correct?
Correct, yeah.
We don't want to share our screen, hold on. We want you to be able to share your screen. Not. Okay, let's start all over. Where is
I'll
he?
try to
Yeah,
share s-
you're up- yeah,
share
you're on
screen
there.
again.
Hold on, let's see.
It's down at the bottom.
Yeah, I'm wondering if I can just make you a co-host.
There you
Oh,
go.
Here we go.
Okay, there. Or that works. There you go.
Thank you. This one, hopefully everybody remembers, this is one of the slides during that workshop. We actually had the drawing here on a table, and we actually hand drew on the map, identifying some of the part of the site assessment, and then identifying those features that we would like to think about preserving or protecting. And this was a list that I put together based on that. The drawing underneath is the one we marked up, but the first was enhance external buffers, preserve internal buffers, honor heritage landscapes, protect historic buildings, maintain scenic vistas, respect trail and walk networks, avoid steep slopes, and preserve mature trees. Now, that was the list that I put together from notes that were taken on the drawing. And we as a group, I think, came to somewhat of a consensus around each one of those items. So that was the list of preferences I think that John Whitten was looking for on that. And anybody have any comments about those? Any additions or?
Well, yeah, so I'm looking at, I have I think the original low, medium, and high density, which actually capture that map. So have we delineated what it is that we want to preserve and protect?
Yeah, I'll go to the next next map here.
Now, that's the one that you
This is the
cast
one.
out, right?
Yeah, this is the one that was passed out today, actually, and We just roughed it out. This is kind of a sector map. This is just kind of the basic site plan. Just for orientation, Bridge Street is on the right, Essex on the left, Woodbury on the bottom. So we're looking, the black structures are the existing buildings, the red ones are the protected or hopefully protected historic buildings on the site. Now, the idea here was to identify the different parts of the site that had different characteristics. And again, the purpose of this particular map is to identify if different places on the site have different characteristics, they could very well have different codes. And if that's the case, where are the sites? How would you identify where they are on the site so that there's some reference point when the codes are developed? The top of the hill on the upper part there is referred to as Brown's Hill. That's the colored one at the top with the two large black buildings on it. Going just east of that, there's a natural area, steep slopes. It's wooded, it's colored in green. That's there. And that existing road in gray is coming down to a roundabout sort of at a major intersection. And then we have that light blue area that is just south of Browns Hill has an HL designation, and that's
Randall, can you
Heritage
use your
Landscape.
cursor? Can you use your cursor by any
I don't know
chance?
if I can get... I don't know if I can use this one. Can you use that? Who has control of that?
Oh, to move it
Oh,
down?
here? Oh, I can point for you.
Can you
How's
point?
that?
Yeah.
I'll
just-
do that.
Yeah, right there.
Got it.
So that's the, where that cursor is, that's the historic landscape, or heritage landscape. And it's that light blue color that crosses, that's really mostly north of the retreat house, and a good part of it in the south part actually is taken up by new construction, both the darker blue and the yellowish area. So that area represents probably 8 acres or so of open space. The entire area, both, is about 13 acres of the, all the way down to the Pilgrim Hall. But right there in the retreat building, we wanted to get enough space away from that so that building is sort of isolated and visible as you come in off Essex Street to that first roundabout. And just to maintain that landscape as it is there.
Emil, can I just
Yeah.
interject a clarification for the board? What this plan represents is all of our explorations to date, basically distilling them into a common plan. So in other words, every plan that's been presented so far had common themes of delineating areas that needed to be preserved, where it made sense to have roads, where it made sense to do sort of traffic calming strategies, and where it made sense to have open space, common open space, and pedestrian connections. So if you went back and looked at all of the previous plans that were presented that were based on the preferences, this is a distillation of that into zones. Is that at all helpful for
Yeah,
folks?
this is a project that evolved over time, as we get new information and kind of did some research.
So tell me what the reason is behind doing this.
The reason behind it is that we started off by looking at the 3 legs on the stool from a town planning perspective. There was the environment, protecting the environment. Economic development was the third one, and then providing for societal needs, social needs. Those 3 components are what towns have to manage their towns to do better projects or to build better projects. And so we tried to take those three and integrate them into a planning effort here. Again, in absence of any information. We had not received any feedback from the public meetings, the abutters, or the workshops. So they were really, that was sort of the soul and the basis for what we were trying to do to meet all of those needs. Protecting the environment was one. This is a special one, the landscape here, because it was cited as a heritage landscape and noted in the Essex reconnaissance report. Thank you. And and anybody who visits the site, I think, can readily see that that's a condition that really applies here. So that was sort of what to protect from the environment. And then societal needs, we were taking a look at residential, maybe providing residential needs that don't currently exist in the town. There's this large middle section of housing that's missing. We have the expensive single-family houses, but we don't have we don't have a lot of the townhouses and multiplex types of places. So we're looking at that as well.
Is it fair to say that this is sort of an elaboration of lower, middle, and upper? And that eventually, were we to have an overlay district, we would have limits on each of these neighborhoods? You know, what could be built, what couldn't, how many units, square feet, so
I think-
on?
I think the idea of trying to identify as upper campus, middle, and lower is sort of gone by at this stage, but yes, I mean, that's right. What is really meaningful to me anyway about this site, and I think Jonathan, when we were working on this, is because it is 100 acres, a substantial amount, and because this is so unified in so many ways, it's a very cohesive site because it was a campus, that it could very easily, I think, fall into pieces and be parceled out individually, developed differently, and so forth. So I think what was important when we were looking at it was is there a way to conceive of something here that keeps the cohesiveness of this site intact and allows it to not only for the site, but to fit into the neighborhood in terms of the composition of the housing.
Here's what the theological seminary, if I can try and put words into their mouth, is going to say, which is, this is all well and good, but it has a very different road system, and so the neighborhoods are sort of fit in with the road system. And it's not clear that ultimately the developer of this site will want a road system that looks just like this. And so if you want to designate areas where certain uses and certain quotas are allowed by special permit, presumably, you have to stick with the existing road system. Even though you might have a neighborhood that looks like this, but you can't, if you somehow try and codify this, you're also codifying the road system. And it's not clear the developer is going to agree with that.
Yeah,
They
I was
might
wondering-
want a different road system.
That's what I was thinking, exactly the same thing, is can you extract this road system completely out of here, as shown on the drawing that you've done, and leave these areas as they are?
Well, this was put together actually using at 8.1.12. First thing you do is identify locations of buildings. We got a lot of objection from people seeing boxes being put on the landscape. They were done for a reason. Everything was done to scale. Everything was done to come up with a configuration. We wanted to originally keep the original roads and sort of work around them. But there's an efficiency that comes about by adding more roads in a lot of important ways. But to keep a compact development, but allow it to really work and function in a cohesive way. So the roads actually are not the first thing that go in. They are almost the last thing to go in on a project, on an open space. I mean, whether Gordon Conwell,
Yeah, I understand what you're doing.
yeah.
And I know the seminary is going to have this concern, and I have this concern, is you've already superimposed on this a presumption of how this is going to be, how this is going to be divided by putting this road system in. And as Bill said, that may or may not be how this is developed. So I'm wondering, can you retain the continuity and the intent without the road system?
I think that can be broken down into individual pieces, and it's worth doing that. And a great place to start, I think, is one of the preferences was to maintain a pedestrian spine that allowed you to get from the bottom of the hill to the top of the hill. Now, so that's been delineated here, and I don't know whether it can be pointed to.
This is the red line.
No, I understand that. That's all very
let's just
clear.
build it in building blocks. So if you're going to preserve that, then that creates an edge, and we're not at a road yet, but it creates an edge between the heritage landscape and the darker blue area. So that suggests a line. So there's an internal edge that's suggested by the fact that you're maintaining that pedestrian route. So that's the next step from what the consultants did, which was just pretty much put ovals around areas. If you're going to follow the preferences, you need to change the edge of a zone and say, okay, so that's the edge of the heritage landscape, and that's a pedestrian spine that you desire to maintain. Now, any of these things could be changed under special permit, but what's great about starting with that one piece, you've identified that this pedestrian spine, along with its mature trees that goes through the heritage landscape, is important, and we've shown the edge of a zone defined by the edge of it. So there's one building block, just one. Okay, so far so good. So now you take another building block. We most likely, and you might not have to, you most likely will need another curb cut and an entry into this property if you increase the density. And both the consultants and Emil and I worked at, seeing how high we could get this density, how far can we push it to the limit. And when you do, obviously what comes into play is you need to manage being able to expand the septic system, stormwater management, retention basins, and potentially curb cuts. So if you're going to put a curb cut in, and this is a great launching point here in terms of roads, if you're going to put a new curb cut in, you kind of need to know where that ought to go early on. Because let's say this thing gets developed in, 10 phases, 20 phases over the next 20 years, or even the next year. The first developer in isn't necessarily going to trigger the additional curb cut or the additional septic area. So if you don't think about where that needs to go, you can easily miss it, and you've missed the opportunity to get the additional curb cut in, or it goes in a place that's less opportune. So it's not dictating it, but it's looking ahead and saying, if you need a curb cut, is this the right place to put it? And that curb cut happens to be in a spot where there's the greatest sight lines on Woodbury Street, because the existing curb cut is on a curve and doesn't, if somebody could point to the existing curb cut.
That's a horrible sign.
That has very, very dangerous sight lines, and right now is an entry only. So does it force a developer to put a curb cut in? No, but it says if there's ever maximum build out here, this is a likely place for a curb cut. So it's just looking ahead.
Mm-hmm.
So I get
So
it.
there's some building blocks.
No,
There's some building
I get
blocks.
It. I get it. And
Okay.
Obviously, a great deal of thought has gone into this, and I'm not objecting to that. What I'm concerned about is, in this drawing, you have presupposed what the optimum development would look like without knowing how it's going to be developed. So, and there's that dynamic tension, I get it. You want to try and preserve and protect the best features of the land, while remaining as flexible as possible to accommodate what may come, which we don't know what that might be. So I'm just, and it's my concern is all of a sudden you've superimposed what you believe are the best divisions of this property and road system to serve those divisions of this property. So I have no problem with the sort of divisions, heritage landscape and central neighborhood, et cetera, but we don't know how that's going to be developed. We don't know whether, and because I'm really going back to looking at your prior low density, mid density, and high density, and all those configurations are different. I thought that was a great way to look at that site. It gave us a good sense of here's how this site could potentially be developed in different scenarios. And it actually lays out in a much clearer fashion for me, you know, where those corridors are that you just described, you know, the pathways and the trees and the landscape buffers. So that's very helpful. So I'm having a hard time transitioning to this latest map and going, aren't we using this current map presupposing how this is going to be laid out and developed?
Again, go ahead. You want to say
I just
something?
want
Yeah.
I want
No,
a clear
I know.
answer.
Sure.
Not an academic discussion of all these things. I want a clear answer, yes or no.
Yeah, well, the first thing we were trying to do is decide what part gets preserved or protected, what part is the development area, and it's this yellow area is developable. This becomes, right here, becomes septic expansion future, but this is all developable, all in here and up in this area. So that, once you identify what area gets developed, then we went into the various scenarios with actual layouts. And if you found those helpful, nothing has changed. But what we need to do right now is to, well, how would you develop those differently, and do they require a different code in these areas because of their conditions?
So what this really reflects is your medium density development analysis of February 6th.
Well, actually,
This accommodates
it's a
all
combination.
three of them,
All
and
three would work in this scenario.
that's the flexibility. And in fact, what's interesting to note is that we actually, under a hybrid combination, we were able to exceed any density that the consultants achieved. We were able to exceed that density.
No, good.
So
Got it.
let me just finish.
Yeah.
Finish. And at the same time, preserve the areas of preference that the board was hoping to preserve.
Right.
So again, this just shows an example of a map of how to get to that maximum density, and it doesn't predicate any particular buildings, any particular uses, other than what you decide, you know, your available uses are and your codes that go with them.
So,
But it does, what it does do is it sets aside septic expansion area, right? It does set aside pedestrian corridors, and it does set aside
No build areas.
no build areas, and it sets aside a potential curb cut. Now,
got it. So
So-
I think the answer to my question is, yes, you could take this road system out. You could extract this road
Yes.
system out as shown here.
yes, and do a different road system.
And have those areas still designated.
Yes, but
Okay.
you'd have to show how, in the future, you didn't create premature checkmate in the chess game.
Yeah,
So-
you're making it much more difficult if you do take the roads out. But because when you do the codes, you have to decide what are the tools you're going to be working with to actually reconstruct what you're looking at there in the site plan. And that's where the roads become important, because there are lot sizes, there are setback requirements, there are building sizes and so forth.
So for example,
Integrated.
to give a very specific example, by moving the road a little tiny bit away from the septic area, it allows the septic area to be rebuilt, expanded, even raised up if it has to be raised up, the topography naturalized, be turned into a usable open space, so it provides that flexibility. And if you leave that flexibility there, then you have the potential to have maximum build-out. If you remove that flexibility prematurely, again, you could have a situation where you do not have enough room to expand your septic system, or have proper utilities or stormwater management.
Got it.
So-
No, that I understand.
So it's just looking ahead.
But I think what you've done is to craft a road system that permits the maximum density.
Absolutely, yes.
And if you don't account
Yeah.
for the expansion and the curb cuts,
Right.
then since this development may expand over time, that you'll run into a situation where that expansion can no longer take place.
Exactly.
Because there's not enough room for the septic, or there is not a roadway to accommodate the traffic.
Exactly. And some of these, and again, the roads don't have to be in this configuration, but for example, the secondary road in front of Pilgrim Hall allows you to create much greater density in that area and even intrude a little bit into the heritage landscape without disrupting it. So again, those are the techniques that we created to create more flexibility, not less, and more density, not less, more dollars in terms of potential real estate sales, and more fiscal benefit for the town.
Okay.
And if somebody can present that, if a developer comes through and says, I have a completely different idea,
Right.
at least you have a roadmap of, okay, developer, did you think about additional traffic? Did you think about additional septic? Did you think about additional stormwater? And then there's a metric to look at, and then you can deviate from it, but there's a metric to look
So
at.
are you envisioning this as a concept plan
In a sense, yes.
that would be taken before town
Yes.
meeting?
Yes. And then this is also the divisions in where the codes would change.
Right.
So one color would be one code, another color would be another
Okay.
code.
So this is the concept plan, and within each of these zones, I'll call them zones, development can occur based on what?
Based on what codes you write to apply to those zones. And this very closely follows what the consultants have done so far in terms of building scenarios.
So are you envisioning that within each of these zones, you're going to have different zoning?
Yes.
So you, in theory, could have 5 or 6 different,
There might be different dimensional requirements, height,
Yeah, it would be the same matrix, but
Yes.
maybe just different numbers in it. So you'd have, in this case, the 3 areas that are built up are the north, the central, and then the stables area. Those are the 3 residential areas, or 1 assisted living. So it'd be basically 3 codes there. Plus, the open space would have a lot fewer codes involved in it. But
So in summary, it accommodates all of the scenarios that the consultants built, plus some that we built that have greater density and benefit, with the exception, and here's an important piece, with the exception of any scenarios that didn't honor the preferences that the board agreed upon. So for example, in a couple of the columns, and maybe Emil, you can guide us through next, in a couple of the columns of the scenarios, there were, in the central campus, there were 11 acres of various scenarios that spread across the heritage landscape. And if you use those scenarios, then what you're saying is those preferences are no longer valid. In other words, you're not going to keep the heritage landscape intact. You're going to develop all of that. So, and that's something that the board should come to consensus on, and then the town needs to vote on. Do you preserve some open space, or do you not preserve open space? So there's a couple of scenarios and Emil, maybe you can walk us through which ones those are, that
Yeah.
don't accommodate preserving the heritage landscape.
right, and that's sort of the challenge, is how do you craft the zoning so it doesn't become, you're not balkanizing this piece of property?
Well, just stay with the heritage landscape. If you draw a line around it and say it's the heritage landscape, you have to decide what the code is in that. So, and if the code is you can build whatever you want in there, then I guess the question would be, how are you preserving public access to the property or open space? So you
Yeah.
can do that.
Well, if,
Essentially, you have to build an illustrative plan to see how it's going to look. And again, this goes right toward predictability, that, again, for a developer coming in, if there is a plan that's set up like that and he wants very quick streamlined approval, that's the plan to go with to get it done. Otherwise, it goes through a special permit or some other type of,
I mean, with some of these
Even-
concept
so-
plans, you could set up some of these very, very high-density strategies and have them almost by right.
yeah.
right,
That's right.
so the heritage landscape, you wouldn't actually have to code that if you elected to preserve it.
Yes,
It
exactly.
would be a conservation restriction.
Exactly.
So
But that, the board has to
Yeah.
decide how they feel about that, and the town has
So-
to vote on that.
Right, and that's where you're going to run into problems, I know, with the seminary and certainly with, you can't take that entire area,
Well,
heritage landscape, and
the map doesn't take the entire area.
exclude it from development.
No, but you have to, the board is here, needs to be here to decide what the consensus of the board is where's that dividing line.
Right,
So, and that's what we should discuss tonight. So this plan shows an example of how to do it, but the board has to look at it and say,
Yeah, and the
we
other,
agree or we don't agree.
the other aspect is the intensity has never been really determined by the town. You know,
Right.
how much is too much, what's not enough in terms of development. So the idea of, again, identifying the open space to be preserved, I think it's the most important open space, number one. But, and it's also not that amenable to doing large buildings on it because of the slope on the site and the requirement for parking. So for a couple of good reasons, it's an ideal area to preserve it.
so,
Well, let me just add, though,
Yeah,
on
let me finish.
January 26th at the workshop, I know that David Gamble approached me, and he asked what I would like to see come out of that meeting. And one of the comments that I made to him is I would like to understand what the consultants learned from their interactions at the prior workshop about what the townspeople thought about the density for this site. Because obviously, that's an important consideration, and so we don't really have that information, but I get the sense that that three-legged stool really is important to the people in town. So clearly, everyone would like to see fiscal benefit from this site. They'd like to have access to the site, and we voted that the least appealing scenario to the planning board was single-family 40,000 square foot lots.
right.
So there was a consensus that there should be some diversity in the housing stock to appeal to a demographics that are presently not served by the existing houses here in Hamilton.
Right. No, I totally agree. So the challenge here then is going to be, and it'll be for the town, I understand the public is concerned about, it's going to be concerned about traffic, light, and noise, and fiscal impact, and environmental impact, all good things. Other than that, they can't articulate density, because it's not real to them, these are just numbers. So my question is, can you take this map and then meld it with what the consultant did? Because we still, and this is what I said in the last meeting, is consideration is, as we modify these areas or develop conditions or restrictions on these lands, you're extracting value from this land or adding value to it. But I'm thinking now of economic value A, to the seminary, because that's what they're most concerned about, and value to the town in terms of economic benefit, because that's what the town is concerned about. So our challenge is going to be melding, as we take these areas and decide density, how is that impacting the value of that land?
Well, Amy,
And you can zero in on that. There's an
just
exact
said.
area, there's an exact area to zero in on if you want to zero in on it. Can we just get the map up and just circle it? It's pretty much,
Okay.
But Amy
it's not vague.
actually did an analysis of just that.
Good.
That's what your handout is.
Well, this,
No, I'm,
just a quick comment on this. This is Barry's information.
right,
that was
it
taken-
says consultant's data, so that's why I'm looking at this.
Correct. But I used his same breakdown, setup,
But you have to
scenarios and so
flip the
forth.
page.
But he also put some color on it, because what's important is what he also identified as market prospects: strong, good, fair, good, user-driven, located on the top of that sheet. So it's color-coded in terms of occupancy and use. That's important for the seminary, it's important for the community and everybody, really. So I wanted to just highlight that. So where he said the use was all single-family housing, he said that was a strong probability, so it's green. And we did the same thing with the other uses and characteristics. So it's just good to be reminded about that as you look at the numbers. And all of these figures come from Barry's last page, actually, on his, this is what the planning board had come up with the three levels: the low intensity, the medium intensity, and the high intensity development, primarily in the central campus, which is the top category right here. So occupancy use, new 55 plus, single to multiplex residential, and then some combination of multiplex residential and new assisted living, senior housing. So this is where that high intensity, there'd be a combination of housing plus medium-sized 80-bed.
Can you, hold on a second?
Yep.
You're throwing a lot of data at me. So is this page that we're looking at your construct?
This says planning board data, yes.
Okay.
I tried to set it up the same way that I did with Barry's data, so that we can compare them, go to the next slide and start comparing them.
So, okay, so does this have any correlation to the map that you introduced earlier?
Yeah, this all relates to the information that you've seen before, where the low intensity, medium, where you saw those illustrative.
The maps.
The maps. where you
so
saw
all
the
these
illustrat-
scenarios fit on that map,
Correct.
every single one.
Got it, okay.
So that's all related, yeah.
Okay, so where are we going with this?
So the next, we drop down to the next one, which is the breakout analysis, the build-out breakout analysis. So again, the consultant's data looked on the top. The bucket list that he set up really are realistic or strong opportunities, realistic, good, realistic, fair to good. So those realistic ones are the ones that are most likely to happen from a probability standpoint. The user-driven is kind of optimistic. Those are mostly the life science buildings. They could happen, could take a long time, whatever, so it's optimistic. And then the last one, preserve landscape, which was one of the key things in the list of preferences that the planning board discussed at the workshop meeting. How important is preserving landscape in this particular case? And this breakdown, actually, we took all of the Barry Abramson's options there, and we highlighted 4 of them, which seemed to fit the preferences that were established by the planning board, including preserving the landscapes.
And
So we grayed out the parts of it that did not comply with, each one of these scenarios was taken as a unit. So you did the upper, the lower, and then the central campus. They were all taken as a unit, as option 1.A, 1.B, 2.A, and so forth. So we identified really 4 of them there that sort of fit the categories that could,
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Who's seen this before tonight?
I have,
Marty has, Jonathan and myself, 3 people.
Great.
Well, we're not
No,
going
no,
to, come to a decision.
I mean, I got
We're
it,
trying
I
to-
got it early.
trying to prepare for a meeting.
Stop,
I got it earlier today.
no, hold on. Before you know what I'm going to say, I'm not objecting to the fact that you've seen this before, but this is a lot of data.
Yeah, no,
You're
It is.
describing at 9:30 at night.
we're not going to make any
And
decisions on this.
I'm trying to absorb all of the work that you've done. I'm not objecting to this. I'm trying to understand it.
Yeah.
And I'm drinking from a fire hose right now.
Yeah, no,
So it's like, whoa.
no, that was one of our rules. If you see something for the first time that night, you're not going to vote on anything.
Yeah, well.
You're not even gonna talk about it,
This is like when we
really.
were doing 133 Essex. It's
Exactly.
like people were screaming that they got stuff that night, and they were going, well, we can't deal with this.
Well, we got this information only a week ago,
Right.
so we're trying to put information
I
together.
appreciate it.
So-
I appreciate it. It's just like, whoa.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
My head is spinning. Okay.
We'll skip to the
So-
end then.
So slow down and tell
Okay.
me what you would, put this together for me, back up and tell me how you want this to fit into, you presented this map with these various distinguished areas.
Yeah. I'll go to the end because it all comes down to net annual fiscal benefit. And if you look at the bottom of this particular sheet,
Which one, which sheet?
this one on the screen there, it's the
Breakdown analysis.
breakdown analysis, page 1 of 2. Along the bottom there, it's the net annual fiscal benefits.
Okay, got it.
So we looked at these 4 categories. What we did not do is put a new life science building. We did not look at that at the bottom of the hill, a 200, or at the central campus, a 200,000 square foot building taking up 11 acres. So those we took out because they really didn't comply with the preference list on the, by the board. So again, this was the planning board data. We wanted to compare those. But this is the interesting one in the end. We took out 2 scenarios that Barry Abramson did, scenario 2.B and 3.B. And then we compared them with our high density, high intensity on the planning board one on the right. So you have the 2 in the center there are consultants. The one on the right is the planning board. We were all using the same data from the consultants on the lower campus, 197,000 square feet, 209 units. We were using all the same information on the upper campus. Building A was new life science, Building B, reuse existing buildings. So we used the same data, top and bottom. What we did was think about maybe substituting, using the multiplex residential and new assisted living senior housing one in the center, which has a total of 160,800 square feet. But it's a smaller building. It's 50,000 on 2 levels, which means 25,000 square foot footprint. And it has residences down there as well. So it has a smaller building that is more comparable to the residential scale that would be developed there to be more fitting rather than a monolithic mega building down at the bottom hill, which David Gamble didn't even try to put in residences next to it because it just doesn't work, doesn't fit. But if you look at the bottom line here, so the total campus gross square footage, the second to the bottom line, for all 3, the planning board then, on our scenario, comes up with 682,857 square feet. Again, these numbers come from Abramson. We did the multiplex residential because that was our product, and the new assisted living.
So you keep saying the planning board. The planning board hasn't voted on any of these. This is a construct.
This is why we're discussing it.
that you, Jonathan and Marnie have evidently come up with. And I have to say, and I'm very appreciative of the time and effort you put into this, but I have to tell you, I'm a bit I'm concerned and a bit upset that the three of you are working in a private fashion, and it feels to me springing this on the rest of the board. Now,
Well, can I just interject?
No, I
No,
want to, no,
because we just-
don't argue with me. Let me finish expressing my thought. This is hard to digest, again. I want to read this because I think there's real value here.
There is.
I'm just saying, the process here feels like we've got three individuals who are working very hard, and I appreciate that. So this is, that have done a construct that looks, based on what I can tell, very useful. But I've had no time to look at this. Beth has had no time to look at it. Richard hasn't, and Bill hasn't. Well, that's 4 of the 7 members of this board, and I don't know how to. I don't know how to respond to this because I haven't had time to actually digest it.
And I understand that, and just let me
Yeah.
clarify, I received this information just today. I had to struggle to understand it as well, but the planning board is in a unique position. We got the information from Barry Abramson last week. We have gotten really no serious feedback from the consultants, the working groups and whatnot as to how to proceed. But at the same token, we have received many messages to hurry up, town meeting.
No, I get it.
You know, so you can't have it both ways. You can't say, don't work behind the scenes, but wait, nothing's happening.
No,
So
no,
it's like it's a
I'm
little
just-
bit of a no-win situation here for the planning board. So if we don't anticipate what's coming down the pike,
I get it, I
we're
get it.
behind the 8 ball,
I'm-
and we're the bad guy.
No, I'm not. I'm just being honest, okay? I'm not finding fault. You guys have done a lot of.
It is strange. but-
You've done a lot of good work, and there's a lot of value here. I'm just feeling like, whoa. I need the time to sort of digest this and then actually ask intelligent questions.
Right. I think that the real takeaway here is, and once if you studied Barry Abramson's work product
Yeah,
from
yeah.
last week, which I did,
Yeah.
then once you start looking at this, you'll see how it follows
And I'm
through.
sure I will.
Yeah.
It's just
It
very,
tracks.
it's just very hard to do right now.
Yeah.
This whole thing raises a completely separate question, and it's not relevant to what the work was, but this sounds like you have formed a subcommittee of this board.
No, I
Well,
mean,
wait, let me
I'm just
finish.
saying that-
Let me finish. If you're working together, that's very close to forming a subcommittee. And you haven't, but maybe you should, and that means you're going to need to start keeping minutes and things like that.
Right. And-
But be careful, because it could be an open meeting violation.
Right. Well,
Okay?
Rick and I worked on the flexible zoning development, and so actually, I have not participated in formulating this particular chart. I just received it. I didn't work on it.
Yeah, no, I'm.
But I think what I want to point out here is the takeaway from this is that AMIL has shown that you can adhere to the planning board's preferences, and with the scenarios, 2 of which are directly from the consultants, the only change being to the central campus, there's the potential revenue of, and when this would unfold might be years in the future, of $2.4 million. And if you look at Barry Abramson's materials, if I can find his last page. Oh, no, that's not where it was, but there was the only scenario that produced more revenue than the one that Emil has shown was the one that had the very large life science building in the central campus to the exclusion of any residential development. So that took up the entire 11 acres.
There was a life science in the central campus?
Yes,
Yeah, 200,000 square foot
200,000 square foot.
on 11 acres.
I remember the,
That was from David Gamble.
I'm calling it senior housing,
Yeah.
no, assisted living. I
It's
don't
scenario 3A.
Front page.
Okay.
So that's
No, I
the-
mean, I'll take your word for it. I
Yeah,
just-
So that's the
no,
only one,
scenario
that's the
3A.
only one we haven't exceeded and maintained the preferences that the board has
Yeah, yeah,
expressed.
Yeah.
So that seems like a win-win.
Right.
No, again,
And we're, nobody's asking you to vote on anything. We're just sharing the
Right.
information.
right. Appreciate that. I'm just saying, I'm not the brightest bulb in the tree, so getting this at 9:30 at night and trying to absorb all the good work that you've put into this is just overwhelming for me.
It was overwhelming to work on.
What you may be is the brightest bulb on the pole.
Yeah, well,
The other thing we find exciting about it is it retains all of the flexibility that and scenarios that the consultants presented, other than the very large life science building across 11 acres of the middle campus.
And
That's the only thing it doesn't include.
So, how do we then take, because you've obviously...
And the board could say, no, I want a giant life science building spread across the campus, and we put it before the town, and they say, yes, we want that, and away we go.
So, how do we take this, which great document, because you presupposed all my questions
Love it.
and answered them. How do we then take this information and turn it into a,
Code.
A code.
yeah.
That's what we
Working
start
with John.
talking to John Whitten.
That's why it is.
Obviously, you've done that as well.
Well, I-
So I'm just,
Well, no, I
haven't-
haven't had a recent discussion with him, but his initial draft overlay district,
whose overlay district?
the one John
Oh,
Whitten came
okay.
up with.
Yeah.
Where the seminary would develop sort of concept plans and go to a town meeting.
Right.
As a developer emerged with an idea, then, and I didn't think that was politically workable. I think that it's conceivable that you might have to go to town meeting once or twice, depending on circumstances, the market and whatnot. But, I think that to have the concept plan is important. If you want as of right, and this is the words right out of John Whitten's mouth, if you want as of right development, you need a defined plan. If you want anything goes, it almost has to be by special permit.
Okay.
I mean, because otherwise it's not comprehensible to the
So then, it sounds like the natural or logical extension of that is then you would take each of these designated areas and determine, are they by right, or are they, as John Whitten said, you can have 5 gradations of special permit.
Well, I think let's
That way
circle
we're-
back.
Okay.
Let's
Yes,
circle back,
yes.
because we talked about as of right for the reuse of existing buildings, subject to site plan review, and special permit for other forms of new construction. But remember what John Whitten said, you can have special permit light.
No, that's
Special
what
permit.
I'm getting at.
Right.
And
so-
some of these, again, fit in so neatly like puzzle pieces, it wouldn't be hard to make some of these new developments almost by right, or by a very low bar of special permit,
Yeah.
like just a shoe-in.
Right.
As he said, you can structure it in a difficult. The planning board may issue a special permit if, or the planning board shall issue a special permit if the following conditions are satisfied, something along those lines. I may not be repeating his words verbatim, but there are gradations in the
No, I
special
get it.
permitting. So I think the critical thing to remember is if you have a concept plan that developers can follow, then there can be less oversight than if it's a
No,
free-for-all.
and, you know, and there's the rub is, you know, what do you give up and what are you getting by doing that? So, question, and this data may be in here, and I have not absorbed it. You've got the revenue side of each of these scenarios in here, correct?
It's the
Yeah,
net
what-
fiscal.
What I did was,
Fiscal revenue, net revenues to the
on the
town.
bottom, what I did on the, I just based it on square footage and just extrapolated. So what I did was take, if you look on the scenario 3B on this last slide,
Well, okay, what page?
Up on the screen.
on the
No,
screen.
no, I'm looking at,
Compare and contrast, it's on the last page.
okay, that's page,
It's not numbered.
It says one of
Page
one,
one
but
of
it
one.
says Browns Hill, compare and contrast.
okay, hold on.
This one.
Not there yet.
Marty, just so you know,
Oh, okay.
Ken Barnes has his hand up, so
Thank you.
whenever, I just want you, let me know and I'll mute him at the right time.
So,
So what,
okay, so,
so these numbers under the consultants come from the consultants.
Got it.
So the 1.8 and the 2.1 are scenario 2.B and 3.B.
right, so these are the net fiscal benefits to the town.
Correct.
Okay. So, I'm going to put myself in the seminary shoes. So, want to think about what the net benefit, and we may not, it may not be possible. I'm just having this discussion. Is there any way to quantify how these various scenarios play out in sales value to the seminary?
To the seminary. I noticed that
Yes,
Barry
I
had,
actually had a little sheet that I sent around which does that. It highlights it. Now,
When did that come around?
That was
Fair.
last meeting?
that was a while back,
Okay.
and
Is it tied to this?
and it's not incompatible with this. Everybody has slightly different numbers, but the bottom line is basically that commercial development nets the town a lot of value
Oh,
and a
yeah,
lot of money.
Of course.
But it doesn't net Gordon Conwell very much because all they're getting is the value of the land, and all they're getting is the value of these obsolete buildings which are going to be, massively reinvested and rebuilt. Those create a lot of value for the town, but they don't actually net Gordon Conwell that much.
Right.
If you look at what nets Gordon Conwell a lot of money, it's the apartments.
Right.
That's like $30 million in their pocket cash. But that doesn't do the town any good because those apartments are so inexpensive.
I know.
And even with a very modest school load, we get nothing from that. So you have this, yin and yang here where the commercial development benefits the town and not that much for Gordon
Well, it's
Conwell.
not really-
And the residential does just the opposite.
Well, except if you develop the central campus into over age 55 housing, or
Well, now that's
that's where you,
Well, if you do that, then you're benefiting the town a lot.
and the seminary.
Seminaries are going to get, $150,000 a lot for, maybe $100,000 a lot. Yeah, that's $5 million. It's nothing like the $30 million they're getting for the existing apartments.
Well, if Mr. Barnes has his hand up, we'll let him speak at this juncture.
Madam Chairman,
Yes, I know.
All right, he's unmuted.
Okay.
Yes, hi. I just wanted to, again, thank Emil and Jonathan and Marty for working on this, and to say that I've listened to the whole conversation, I am personally not convinced that we need all of the detail in the sector plan. I suspect we can accomplish what the planning board wants to do with the 3-campus layout that has up until now been sort of what everyone's been working off of. But the most important thing is, I just don't think we're miles away. I'm really looking forward to the March 7th meeting. I don't think we're miles away. And so I would just like to say, thank you, and we look forward to continuing this discussion, because I just think we're all moving basically in the same direction.
That's great to hear, Dr. Barnes, and I think we're all looking forward to March 7th. But as chair, I think I'm going to have to bring this discussion of Gordon Conwell to a close, as we have other things on our agenda.
But wait, there's more.
There's more. So I will say, though, that the planning board's preferences have been honored, at least in the one scenario that Emil and with Jonathan's assistance has come up with, and it shows that there can be an annual fiscal benefit to the town of $2.4 million, and how that plays out in revenue for the seminary, I believe is to be determined, and certainly Bill spoke to the economics of that and how the benefits to the town and seminary might diverge to some extent. But we can leave that discussion until March 7th. So.
Very good. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So at this juncture, I would like to proceed with the interviews of our 2 associate member candidates, and then we can turn to minutes, and maybe we can figure out a way of circumscribing a lengthy decision of each one of them.
Who are our candidates?
Let's see, Matthew Hamill.
So I might need some coaching. Can I
Call me.
contact Emil and get
Yes,
some
of course.
coaching?
Yeah, yeah.
Just if I have questions on this?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah,
Okay.
call him, he's better. He knows this stuff better than me.
All right, so that's in our package, right?
Yes, yes, it is. So we have 2 candidates, Darcy Dale, whom I think everyone knows as a former member of the Select Board and also of the FinCom, and Matthew Hamill, who, from my understanding, is new to Hamilton. So as I don't see, is Darcy
I
here?
don't see Darcy on here. Do you want me to text her?
Did you speak with her, Patrick?
I did not speak with her, but I did email her this evening. It was probably too late.
So we'll see. Okay, so you might be the only person here this evening, and so welcome. I hope you have enjoyed the time and the discussion, and I hope it hasn't made
Probably
you
wants to withdraw.
rethink your candidacy, particularly given the time. So it looks like you're relatively new to Hamilton, so I just am going to throw some softballs at you. So what made you decide to move to Hamilton, also known as one of the highest real estate tax towns in the region, as opposed to somewhere where it might be less expensive? But I know the answer to that, because that's why I live here too. And then also why you want to be on the planning board.
Yeah, so first of all, thank you all for having me, and I listened along to that discussion. It was very interesting, and certainly did not at all dissuade me from participating on this board if I'm able to. My wife and I are one of the, I think, many families that kind of migrated from the city of Boston in the light of the pandemic. And when we were deciding where to move, we at the time had one young daughter, and we now have 3 young kids. We wanted to move somewhere that was a place where we could easily access nature. We're both people who love the outdoors. We like, getting to the beach. We like just being outside as much as we can. We want to raise our children to hopefully enjoy that as well. And we wanted good schools. And Hamilton kind of checked both those boxes for us. We loved the beautiful setting and, proximity to the beach and just the kind of tranquil nature of the town. And we know that it has consistently had very highly rated schools, and that was important for us as well. So that's how we landed on Hamilton, and we've been here for now 2 years, just about. And we love it so far. Like I said, we have 3 kids. We plan to stay here for a long time, put our kids through the public schools. And I guess that's a good segue into the second question as to why I wanted to volunteer and be involved, particularly with the planning board. I want to be here a long time. I want to see this town continue to be the great town that it is, and I want to make sure that my children have a good experience being raised here. And so I wanted to get involved really on any level. I last year expressed interest in a few different boards, but the planning board in particular interested me because I think the decisions that the planning board makes have a big impact on the town's welfare and the kind of trajectory that the town is on. So that really interested me. Additionally, I'm a lawyer. I am currently working for a firm that represents cities and towns in lawsuits. And so a lot of my work is representing different boards and planning boards and doing, cases involving land use and things like that. So I thought it would be potentially a good fit.
Have you attended any other planning board meetings other than this particular one?
I have not. I have attended some other board meetings in the town, but I have not had the opportunity to attend a planning board meeting.
And I just wondered whether you had the opportunity to attend any of the workshops involving Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary?
I have not, no.
Well, you have an amazing resume, I have to say. Quite a diverse background.
Yeah, yeah. I've taken a kind of unique path to get where I am, but I'm glad I'm here.
Right. Yeah, so interesting. Well, how do you like working down at Post Office Square? I understand that you're now working at a firm in Post Office Square, right?
Yep, no, precisely. So it's great. I work for a great firm. It's a small law firm. Like I said, we do, or at least I do, almost entirely municipal law. So I represent cities and towns when they get sued. So I do everything from civil rights cases is a large chunk of my cases, a lot of cases involving schools and different public officials, superintendents like that, and things like that. And then, like I said, different boards. So I'm representing a zoning board down the Cape in relation to a contentious dispute over a pickleball court, of all things. And I'm representing a city involving a land use case involving a quarry that's also quite contentious. So I spend a lot of my time reading bylaws, reading zoning codes. And I think, certainly I know as an associate member, I wouldn't be a voting member. But I think I would just bring that perspective to the planning board. And I think I have experience interpreting those codes. And I just think that would perhaps offer a unique perspective as an associate member.
Do any of the other members have questions for Matt? None?
No.
I thought you had a very interesting resume. I just worked in, I worked in the McCormick Building for years, so it's, you're in my old stomping ground.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
It's a good area.
I was a bankruptcy lawyer and worked for the Federal Bankruptcy Court in
Oh, yeah.
in the McCormick Building. And if you've ever have an opportunity, go see the historic courtrooms on the 12th floor. They're-
I will do that, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, if no one else has any questions for Matt, the planning board and the select board jointly appoint associate members to the planning board, so I will entertain a motion that we transmit Matt's candidacy to the select board for final consideration. As we all know, we're one down on a associate position, but after the election, we will need another. So do I have such a motion?
I make a motion.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
So what's the process, since I haven't been here before with, so they apply and then that information comes to us, we interview them?
And then it's transmitted to the select board.
And they make the appointment.
Okay.
So,
We have vacancies, we try to have it advertised verbally with the Board of Selectmen on the town's website, those kinds of places. We get information from folks. Matt's application actually came to us just about a year ago. So happy that that happened. I was happy to see it, I guess, about a month ago. I've been in contact with Matt, and I'm very pleased to see him being recommended.
okay, so I'll take a roll call vote. Jonathan Poor,
Jonathan Poor, aye.
Bill Wheaton,
Bill Wheaton, aye.
Emil Dahlquist,
Emil Dahlquist, aye.
Beth Herr,
Beth, aye.
Rick Mitchell,
Rick Mitchell, aye.
Richard Boroff,
Richard Boroff, aye.
and Marnie Crouch, aye. So Matt, I assume you go by Matt, is that correct?
Yes.
Oh, okay, thanks for that. Your application and your resume will be transmitted to the select board, so I would assume that you will be hearing from them in short order as to whether your application is approved, but I don't really see a reason why it wouldn't be, so.
Thank you all very much for your time tonight. It was a pleasure meeting you via Zoom, and hope to one day meet you in person.
Yes, and be prepared to drink coffee and stay awake.
I'll do that.
Meetings.
Absolutely.
Yes, and thank you for applying, and look forward to working with you.
Thank you, and me as well. Thank you all.
It's nice to have a varied group of people on the board who bring different skill sets, and now we find out that Beth has some computer skills. Yay.
The hidden skill, hidden out there.
Okay, thank you. So now
Thank
we
you.
can turn to minutes, and if anyone can think of a way to shorten this process, you know,
Do we
there's-
want to do a blanket motion
Yeah,
to
blanket
approve
motion.
all the minutes at once?
Sure.
Yeah, she sent something in
Although,
to me,
I,
unless people have particular,
You just have to enumerate the dates that you're,
okay,
right.
so I had very few problems with any of the minutes, except Beth, I'd be happy to work with you on getting your minutes in a little bit better shape. You
That's
were,
fine, I just have a lot of words.
well, no, you had a little problem spelling Patrick Reffert's name,
Oh, sorry, Patrick,
so...
sorry.
It's happened before.
So there were just, I had a few more issues there, mostly grammatical, but, and just the identification of some entities. So if you were to, if the board can accept that I didn't have a problem with the substance, it was more with some stylistic stuff,
Yep.
we could approve her minutes. And then Pat Norton, when he transmitted his minutes, did owned up to not having, he wasn't going to, how did he say it? Vouch for his grammar. So I had some problems with his, but also I had more substantive problems with his minutes because I did notice one error in the first paragraph, and that was just one error. But if the board is amenable, I could also work with him and get him to make those changes. I had very minor changes. I think, Jonathan, you misspelled one word, and I think Emil had, spelled Merwin Walters' name
Can you
wrong.
imagine having her for a teacher?
Well, except that Marnie, you misspelled one word.
Oh, I'm sure I did.
So we did have silk socks.
Silk socks?
Silk
Oh.
socks for stormwater management
Well,
strategy.
maybe if we could all agree, we could approve our minutes, and anybody who had typographical errors in any of them,
Right.
we could exchange emails, get them all cleaned up. And then for those of you who hadn't done minutes before, just go to some of the old minutes or the ones that I did, and you have to put at the end, respectfully submitted in your name and the date they were approved. So if we do that, if we exchange emails and get the minutes cleaned up, we could then, maybe not at the next meeting, but the one after that, just, well, actually, they'll be approved. So, yeah, we can just leave them as approved. What date should we use for the approval? Today?
I think that you should do it today. That way you can get them finished and into me. Then I can make them part of the record that I need to be providing to Robin that she was discussing tonight.
Right, okay, so let's just make a pact that we'll exchange our emails about any kind of corrections quickly. How's that?
And do you want to go over the sub?
I didn't have any, I just found one mistake in Pat's. He referred to
Okay.
all 9 lots on Bridge Street when we were actually considering one.
Okay,
And so, but with
that
yours,
was the only thing. Okay, I just want
Yeah.
to make sure we were clear on
and
that.
so with you, I can call you or whatever, and we can
Right,
go over
and
them.
then, do we know which minutes are still missing?
Oh, yeah, I can,
And do we have, I know we had somebody that, I thought the town,
Yeah, we have a person who has started. She, in fact, will be doing the meeting minutes from tonight.
okay, so, but will she do the backlog of minutes?
We can have her do that.
Because we just, like, we're under a time crunch, so I'm just trying
Right.
to figure out.
We need to peg our dates, and I'll make her aware and have her work on those.
yeah, I can go through this list again. I started in January of 2022. And does anybody recall when we started the hearings on 133 Essex?
Do you want me to do that? When I go home, I can just figure it out. I think I already looked.
I think you
I had
already,
emailed you.
I think they started in September.
August the 9th of 2020.
One or 2020.
what,
It was 2020.
I think the drawings were submitted, though, weren't they, on the 1st of July? 2020?
Yeah, we did get those
2020?
earlier.
Yeah.
oh, then we have a lot of minutes to get to Robin.
Okay.
I mean, a lot of the initial meetings were not that pertinent to the ultimate decision, but still, we need them. So yes, Beth, if you can do that, I know,
Just, because I went through them before, so I'll just look at what we have and then I'll just make a new master list of what we need. How's that?
I know the recent ones we need August 30th, September 13th, September 20th, and October 11th. Those all involved 133 Essex.
Look back on the agenda and see.
Yeah. Okay, so I think, does anyone have any other board business?
Did we vote on the minutes?
Oh, sorry, thank you. Yes, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes subject to,
Do we have to stipulate
Corrections.
which ones then? Is that part of the motion?
well,
Madam Chairman, I would make a motion that we approve the minutes, subject to
Grammatical corrections?
grammatical corrections, the minutes pertaining to the meeting of February 15th, 2022, April 5th, 2022, April 21st, 2022, May 3rd, 2022, May 15th, 2022, June 7th, 2022, June 23rd, 2022, July 12th, 2022, July 26th, 2022, August 16th, 2022, and February 14th, 2023.
Second.
so subject to everyone exchanging emails to correct typos and grammar, we're good, right? And I
So
think,
we need a roll call on that? We've had a
We have to
second.
second it, don't we?
I did. I seconded it
You
before he
seconded,
finished,
so
before he
we-
closed his mouth.
Oh, that's right. That's right, you did, sorry.
so we'll have a roll call vote. Jonathan Poor,
Jonathan Poor, aye.
Bill Wheaton,
Bill Wheaton, aye.
Emil Dahlquist.
Emil Dahlquist, aye.
Beth Herr,
Beth or I?
Rick Mitchell.
Rick Mitchell, aye.
Actually, Richard, you might not have been here for one of the meetings. And Beth, you weren't here for some of the
For
meetings.
a lot of them. So should we just make that an aye for the meetings I attended? Or,
Given, given the hour, I think we can fudge that.
I didn't hear that.
Well, we'll,
I was
Should we
actually
do the-
thinking about that because
No.
I wasn't even on the board for some of these, so I wouldn't be,
You could just,
just assuming.
you could abstain, and, because we do have a quorum.
Actually, we have a quorum. You
Two of you
abstain.
abstain, and we have 5
you
votes.
abstain, and
Right.
we should know from looking at the minutes.
You didn't get a vote from me, I don't think.
No,
Or Sal.
and you can vote on all except the ones where you weren't present, and I think it was only one day,
I think it was the June 26th one.
23rd.
Sure, 23rd, sorry.
So you can vote on all of them except June 23rd.
So I vote on all of the, so vote, yeah, I vote yes on, aye on all but
June
January.
23rd. Right,
23rd.
so we're good, and you abstained. So actually, we
perfect.
didn't have to fudge anything, given the late hour.
How about Rick? Did we
Wait a
hit
minute.
Rick? Oh,
Rick,
Rick?
we didn't finish the roll call.
I already, I
Yeah, he
think I
voted.
said yes.
I
Yes,
think you did too.
okay. We're done.
No.
No, I don't believe it.
Motion
Oh,
to
we didn't
adjourn.
have a vote to adjourn.
Second?
Oh,
Gotta have a
Second.
vote to adjourn. I
adjourn.
move that we adjourn.
We have a motion, a
Who
second.
moved?
We have a second, a motion and a second to adjourn.
Motion by Jonathan, second by Bill.
Okay.
Okay, Jonathan Poor,
Jonathan Poor, aye.
Bill Wheaton,
Bill Wheaton, aye.
Emil Dahlquist,
Emil Dahlquist, aye.
Beth Herr,
Beth or I?
Rick Mitchell,
Rick Mitchell, aye.
Richard Boroff,
Richard Boroff, aye.
and Marnie Crouch, aye.
And before y'all go, this is gonna be my last meeting, I think, before the election, because I didn't take out papers for planning board.
Oh, but
Oh.
There's